Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pedagogy Non Grata podcast, where I interview Faith Borkowski and Judy Boxner. And by the way, you're going to hear this in the live podcast episode because I've given up on editing. So, everything you're hearing tonight is actually what people said. Um, I'm really excited to have Faith and Judy on. They're the hosts of the Literacy View podcast, and it's actually become my favorite podcast for the topic of the science of reading. Despite the fact that I consider this largely a science free podcast at this point. Um, and what I really appreciate about their podcast is a couple things, but one, they're just so on top of things. As I have found it very difficult to keep up with this podcast on a regular basis. They seem to be breaking literacy news, interviewing top researchers on a regular basis, sorry, about upcoming research that has been controversial or has is having strong reactions from people. And they've really become my go-to source for what's new in the literacy discussion area. And I think they really represent their title of the literacy view. It really feels like that is what they are. As the view is to television for politics, they are to science reading and literacy discussion. And I also really appreciate that they're really not afraid to say how they feel and be incredibly honest, even when it's not popular. There's been multiple occasions where I've seen them take unpopular stances and push back and challenge people, but I also feel like they do it in a respectful way. So I think they're doing great work, and I'm really happy to have them on the podcast. So before I go into today's topic, which I think will be slightly controversial, so it's great that we have them here to give their honest opinions. I'd like them to introduce themselves, and I'd really love to hear how this project of theirs started, if they don't mind. And I'll start with Judy, and then we'll go to Faith.
Well, Nate, I'm really honored to be here. And it's so nice not to be the host tonight. I'm loving the feeling of just being regular Judy, just chatting with my friend Nate that I've been friends with now online for about, I guess, 2 years now. I'm a big fan of yours, Nate. So,
Thank
thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting us. Faith and I are delighted. Thank you for the shout outs for the Literacy View. So, how did Faith and I get started? That's a very, very interesting story. I think Faith and I were brought together by the sun, the moon, and the stars. We really didn't know each other from a hole in the wall. Um, it was interesting. This lady, Faith, should I say the name of the lady?
You can.
Yeah, there was this lady, Mary. She reached out to us on social media. It was probably about maybe 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. And she reached out to us. I think it was through LinkedIn, and she invited Faith and myself totally separately. She liked our backgrounds. My background was actually reading recovery, but somebody who was in reading recovery before, but now shifting deeply into the science of reading, structured literacy world. And Faith, of course, was much more involved in structured literacy even before myself. And she invited us to present, I think, at a worldwide literacy conference. Faith, is that right?
It was in India, I
In
believe.
India, right. And it was going to be ran by a lady named Sunita. And she kept talking about this Sunita. And we're like, who is Sunita? But like, like everything else, it sounded exciting. It sounded like we can make an impact on the world. And I said yes to this complete stranger. And Faith said yes too. And we were working with this lady, not working, we were just having fun for a while. And all of a sudden, we the conference kind of went to the back burner. It never happened. And I'm like thinking in the back of my mind, is it happening? Is it not happening? Is it real? Is it not real? We have no idea till this day if that was really even on the plate, to be quite honest. And we did many episodes with Mary, but Mary jumped ship because of the hard work and effort that it takes to podcast and for other personal reasons. And Faith and I decided to stick with it. And Mary's departing words were, "You guys are never going to be able to make it. This is going to be hard. You're going to be barking orders at each other. Podcasting is going to be impossible." And you know what? Quite frankly, that was the best thing that ever happened when she jumped ship, because Faith and I became best friends. We love what we do. We work really well together. Faith has become like family to me. I was just talking to, my partner Paul today in the car, and I'm like, you know, Paul, do you think Faith really loves me? He goes, yeah, I think she actually loves you like a sister. That's why she talks to you the way she does. She's honest with you, and she'll tell you when she's happy, when she's sad, when she thinks you should snap out of it, when she thinks, we really have become a team. And we've divided and conquered roles in this adventure, and we're going full speed ahead, even though we both still work full-time jobs. We still tutor. We're still in the classrooms every day. And, it's funny, like I was in a really bad mood yesterday. I know I'm talking a lot, but I was in a shitty mood yesterday. I was complaining about work. I was complaining about how I can't handle everything. I was complaining about, the daily stuff that a lot of teachers go through and coaches go through. And I said, hey, can you give me advice? And she gave me some advice. But she also told me something that really meant a lot to me. She said, Judy, you're a very different person than the Judy that I met 2 years ago. You're much more confident and you're much more able to speak what's on your mind. And I think that's been the most important part of the literacy view is I'm able to speak my truth and not fear if anybody on social media is going to make fun of me or say they don't agree with me, because I think that's what life really is about, is speaking your truth. And I want to thank Faith Borkowski for helping me on this journey. And I can't wait to see what's to come, because a lot of surprises are on the way for our show.
I love it. And I just want to say, I love how open you are about your journey with reading recovery and that you own it. You find the good and the bad in that. I think that's much better than sort of vilifying it or putting it into a hero worship status, which I think people often put it in this dichotomy. So I really love seeing that. Faith, let's hear about your story.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. And Judy, thank you for those kind words. The feeling is mutual. I think I'm honored that many people feel that I've helped them along the way, and that's very gratifying. I think that's what drives me, that there's a purpose. I think that even came up on Twitter recently, that someone posted something about purpose. Oh, I think it was Leslie, as a matter of fact. She posted something, a quote, and it had to do with purpose. And I said that, well, I know my purpose, so that helps with the naysayers. And and that's pretty much how I feel about everything. I'm honest, I'm a straight shooter. I say what's on my mind. I try not to be nasty about it, but I am straightforward. Maybe that's the New York in me. That's how I roll. And as far as the podcast, I think Judy told you how we met, and it's true, we did not know each other before. But what's interesting is we have very similar upbringings, and in many ways in our personal lives and our backgrounds. Um, I've said this before. I'm 10 years older than Judy, and I feel like I've watched her grow in her role, and just as a person, and like she said, becoming more confident. When we first started this, she was very fearful of people not liking what she would have to say and fearing what they thought of her. And I said to her, Judy, just be yourself. And that's what's going to attract people to our show, because there are many Judys out there who would like to change and don't know how to change. And Judy is the best role model because she is so vulnerable and honest. And she, I think, is perfect for this role in trying to bring people along and see evidence-based practices. And Nate, I think you said it perfectly, that she doesn't vilify, and she doesn't, try to hurt anybody in this. She's just who she is. And that's what I respect in her. And that's what I respect in you, Nate, as well, that when you do any type of study, if there needs to be a change, if you need to update something, you're always honest about that. And I do have the utmost respect for you. So
That's very kind of you to say.
yeah.
Well, I think you really hit the nose on nail on the head right there about Judy when you're talking about Judy, and that um, she's both incredibly respectful to everyone, but she's also very honest, and I think that's a rare combination. Um, Faith, you wrote a book that I think is really apt, even today in the science reading movement, and that's failing students or failing schools. Can you talk a little bit about what drove you to write that book?
Well, I think I've said this before, but I'm a big writer, a reader and writer, and I would keep a journal for years. And I was very frustrated through those years of knowing what's right and not being able to do what I found out along the way was right. And so that was my diary, and I would write down my feelings. It was a way of getting things out. And this was over the course of years, Nate. You know, this went on for a while, and I was already teaching, I don't know, a good 15 years before I even knew about phonics. And here I had a master's in reading, and I had a degree in elementary ed and
Can
special
we
ed.
just pause for a quick second? You had a master's in reading, and you
Mhm.
hadn't really heard about phonics.
Correct.
How wild is that? And I see this on social media. Oh, there's nothing wrong with the teacher training system. The teacher training system, I don't know what it's like today, to be honest, but when I went through it, was broken. And it clearly was broken for a lot of people in a lot of places because if you can get a master's in reading instruction and not know anything about phonics, there's something terrible with your program.
And that's what drove me to write the book.
Yeah, I know it's not our show, but I have to take out the cheers button for Nate. I'm sorry.
You guys make me giggle. You did this.
So yeah, so I started teaching in 1986, and I was 21 years old, went into the classroom, and I did not sub, by the way. I walked right into a third grade classroom and started teaching. And then I was in the city. Classrooms were big, 28 students, 30 students. I had up to 32 students at one point. So, and here I am, a kid myself, really. And then I went for my master's at night, and the master's kind of replicated what I learned in my undergrad. And
Mhm.
phonics just was not taught. And so dyslexia was not a word used, phonics was not taught, and everything was basically picking things up, just by just reading good books. And then I kept looking and looking and looking to find the answers. And I've said this before, a book fell off a bookshelf, and I feel it was meant to be. I was in a bookstore on Long Island. It was called Book Review, and it was the Diane McGinnis book that I'm sure you've heard of by now. Lots of people said that book changed their lives. And after that, there was no going back. And I started to go for training. I went to Washington, D.C. I paid for my own training in phonographics, and which is speech to print. And then I ended up going for OG, got Wilson certified, and that was it. And I was keeping a journal for years and years of this transformation. And when I reread it over the course of years, I said, this could be a book. And I literally used my journal. Obviously, it needed to be edited, but I pieced it together, and it was part memoir and then trying to help other people to understand.
No, I think that's great. And I feel like that story just feels so familiar. And it's actually so apt for our topic. I feel like that's my story, to be honest. I feel like that's what led to Pedagogy Non Grata being started. I think that's what led me to writing a book on this topic was the exact same type of thing where you felt like none of the important things that you were supposed to learn in teachers college were what was taught. And you see struggling students and you just want to help them. You want to help other people help those students. And there just seemed like there was just divide between what was evidence-based according to research and what was actually popular in classrooms. And I think, we're here today to talk about the science reading movement actually and give our critical evaluation of it. And I think this is what caused the science reading movement, at least in part, was at least one half of it is teachers being like, hey, there's a problem. We're not following the research. We need to start doing that. And I think it wasn't even researchers that really inspired people. It was books like Lisa Moult's Speech to Print, or Diana McGinnis's book, or David Kilpatrick's book. I think those are the books that really sparked this. But I also feel like it was the parents of dyslexic students. And, going back to the title of your book, Failing Schools or Failing Students, I wonder if we'd have so many struggling readers if we'd actually been promoting evidence-based instruction in teachers' colleges. And I have no blame for teachers. I know there's some people out there who want to blame teachers. I don't think it's at all their fault. But I have a lot of blame for teachers' colleges. I did my reading specialist program, and my special education specialist, and I didn't even hear really the words phonics or phonemic awareness or morphology or fluency. The pillars of reading weren't even discussed. Like, it was all like teaching to learning styles and fostering a love of reading. And I'm sure it was basically a rehash of what I learned in my bachelor's, just like you said. So that felt super familiar. So um, let's talk about the science of reading movement. Do you guys agree? Is that where the science of reading movement comes from?
Judy?
Is that where the science of reading movement comes from? Mhm. Tell me a little bit more about that prompt.
I just mean, like, I feel like there was this belief amongst both teachers that what we were being taught in schools wasn't what we were supposed to be wasn't really the way we were supposed to be teaching kids. And there's a lot of parents of dyslexic students who were really upset that their students weren't being taught
You
in a
know,
way that aligned with evidence.
yeah, so it's really interesting, actually. That makes me think. So it's interesting. All this research was out there. I started teaching in 2000. 2000 was the first year I was a classroom teacher. I entered education in 1997. And I remember that phonics was on its way out. There were like sprinkles as I was just entering the classroom, and then it was on its way out. So we had all this information and research, but I don't understand. It went out. And then balanced literacy was a way of life for me in the classroom from 2000 till 2013. That was my life. And we closed our door, and we knew phonics was important, and we kept doing it because we knew in our hearts that it had value, and we still gave grammar instruction and so forth. But we were made to believe that there was a different approach that worked much better, which was balanced literacy. And till this day, I'm going to say there were some portions of balanced literacy that I still embrace and love. I think that in my balanced literacy days, I saw kids reading more books, holding more books, excited about books. So there's a lot of stuff going on with science of reading and the way it's being rolled out that I think still needs to be fleshed out. And I text Faith about that all the time. But it's still interesting. So we knew all this stuff. However, in 2013, I was selected by a government grant in 2013. It was called the I-3 grant, which was, I think, funded by the Obama-Biden administration, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it was. And I was told this is going to be the golden ticket to fix literacy. And I guess maybe at that time, the intentions were good. Maybe the administration thought we're going to make reading better. I don't know. I didn't question. I cried when I was initially selected to do it because I didn't like change, and I was happy being a classroom teacher. But then I was literally told by everybody and their mother that it was like the golden standard, once in a lifetime opportunity. And I jumped hard. That was 4 years of my life. But it's confusing because there was a lot of research that contradicted everything that I was told to believe. Now, do I regret being trained? I actually don't. I think it's a big part of my journey. And I think I am a decent reading instructor because of my learning, both good and bad. But I just don't know how we got it all so wrong. And now, for the last 8 years, I've been in the very structured literacy world, the science of reading world, because all of a sudden, abruptly, reading recovery was ending in New York City very fast. As fast as it came in was as fast as it came out. It was like a 4-year run. Principals were waiting for it to be over. They would ask us, when is it over already? When is this thing that we signed, this free thing, over? And then I had a probably 50% success rate with kids that I was working with. And thinking back, probably the 50% that did really well probably could have done a hell of a lot better if I had all the knowledge that I have now about, orthographic mapping, how to teach kids how to decode well, and so forth, and
And
a
I just
million
want
other
to
things.
say,
Yeah.
this bothers me so much.
I'm sorry.
No, not you, but hearing this
But
bothers
this is the
so
way it
much.
went.
I know,
Yeah,
no, I
let me
know.
just let me just finish. And then so reading recovery went out, and as fast as it went out, all of a sudden there was a new team being formed in New York City with which was going to be called Universal Literacy. And I jumped as fast as I could to interview. And I remember one of the questions on the interview was about the 5 pillars of literacy instruction. And even though I knew a lot about those pillars, I didn't answer that question well. That's crazy. With all my education, with my master's, with my bachelor's, with all of my reading recovery training, I didn't get that question 100% right. And that was the hot program for a while in New York City. It was called Universal Literacy. We were really implementing the phonics of the science of reading. But here's the problem in New York City, and it's not the same problem everywhere. Every time a new mayor or a chancellor comes in, we have mayoral control in New York City. The mayor controls who the chancellor is. The chancellor's in charge of schools. Every time there's a new person, we start all over again. So any gains we make are over. And look at what's happening right now. Unfortunately, and I know maybe I shouldn't even be saying it, but I'm going to say it because it's my truth. New York, our chancellor's leaving. And we're starting again, and fingers crossed. Teachers are really scared. They're like, what does this mean for New York City now? What does this mean for the science of reading now? And that's it. That's my shtick.
All right, Faith. Yeah, I think you're jumping the gun. You're ready to respond.
No, I'm going to be brief with this. It just saddens me that I was part of that whole movement with reading first during all those years that Judy said that balanced literacy was in the schools. And then 2013, she was being trained in reading recovery. Meanwhile, no, not you, but the idea is that we went through the whole reading first years with No Child Left Behind Act, the year of 2000, 2001, and all of those early years. And I mean, by that point, 2013, we should have had all the information that we needed in the hands of teachers, in the hands of principals, because the information was there. We called it SBRR, scientifically based reading research, which now we call SOR. But that's how far this goes back. And I was part of that movement. And this is the problem, that it was out there, but people weren't utilizing the information. And it was only really targeted school districts, any low performing school district that maybe they had the grant that they would know about this. But as Judy said, just like leadership in New York City is transient, a lot of our school leaders are transient as well, especially in low performing school districts. So they did not stick around. Many of those principals who were trained in what we call SOR, they went for other jobs, new principals come in, and then it goes right back to what it was. And at least that's what it was then. I don't think that will happen as much now because of social media, the internet. It's a different time. So hopefully it doesn't happen like that. But, from what I'm hearing, there's still pushback, even at this point. So.
I hope you're right. I think
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Nate. I'm so sorry. You're the host and I'm interrupted.
it's okay.
Was there
Whatever
any
you want to
data
talk
that
about.
any of you guys knew about that was saying that something that was happening in the phonics world was failing?
I'm not aware of anything. I've heard there was complaints about how Literacy First was rolled out, but I've never read the criticisms of Literacy First, if I'm being honest. I've just seen very brief snippets about it on social media. I think the big claim seems to be that some of the people who were behind it seem to have profited in some way, but I don't even know if that's really true, if it's just gossip.
I don't believe that that's the case. I think that there were people um, who had programs and they were heavily invested in keeping a certain narrative going. And when SBRR came out, they pushed back and they had powerful interest groups that kind of pushed their own agenda, and they were strong enough to say, oh, this is not right that you're pushing certain programs in and hours are out, such as reading recovery. And there was a lot of pushback, and slowly things started to change. And then I know in New York City, we had also a chancellor who was very much into the Teachers College, Lucy Calkins type of thing, who then brought in this once again. And I'm sure many people out there listening know the story, so I don't want to rehash it. But in answer to your question, a lot of this is cyclical. It goes in, it comes back. It goes out, it comes back in. And a lot of that has to do with people having something to lose. It's all about the money. That's right.
Yeah,
It's all about the
it's the
money.
money. I just want to build on that for a second. 2 years ago, I wrote The Scientific Principles of Reading Instruction, and I've just submitted a manuscript for an update to that book. But I attempted to summarize all of the research on reading instruction that was well established. And I don't know there's a single finding I had in that book that was novel from the year 2000. I think basically everything I summarized, we already knew in the year 2000. I could find studies that go back 24 years that support what I was saying. And I'm not aware of anything that's really been disproven or changed to any serious extent. There's things we have a little bit more nuance on, but that's about it. Like this research really is 20 years old.
100%. At this point, I would say it's probably, look, some of these studies were done, most of them were done in the 1990s. And that's what pushed the whole No Child Left Behind and then reading first. So this was really from the 1990s. So we're talking, it has to be at least 25 years old at this point. So it's
Can I challenge
right.
both of you? Can I challenge both of
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. Go for it.
I think it was more than just the money. I think it was actually beliefs and money.
Mm.
I really feel that a lot of people in the balanced literacy world believed it with their heart and soul that what they were doing was the right way. And I think for a very long time, I was one of those people.
I was one of
Now,
those people.
yeah, was it right that I believed it to the core of my soul? I mean, I just remember teaching kids how to read, and it felt easier in the balanced literacy days. I would take these books, a lot of them would be patterned, and I would read the book. There was one method that I was trained in where I'd read the book to the kids 3 times before they had to go on their own. 3 times, and I would write the procedure. And by the third time, a lot of the kids started, they had one-to-one correspondence, and they started to sound like a reader. And it's almost like, I don't take drugs, but it almost felt gratifying. Like when I drink a Diet Coke, that's my drug of choice.
I have
It
a Diet
felt
Coke
kind
right
of
here.
magic. What?
I'm drinking a Diet Coke right now in my coffee mug to make it
No way.
look like
I
it's
knew I liked you, Nate. I liked you from day one, but the only difference is you don't look like you need Diet Coke. You work
No, it's
out
the
with.
caffeine. I need the caffeine to stay awake this late at night.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, I really think it wasn't just financially driven. I know Faith and I have gone back about this for years. I definitely think, of course, people were making money. I mean, every classroom under their sun had the Fontes and Pinnell literacy continuum in it. Every classroom had a million boxes of the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. So, of course, money comes into play. But I truly, in my heart of hearts, think a big part of the issue is also beliefs.
I think you're probably right. I think there's definitely an element of belief in there too. Faith.
I think a lot of it is these charismatic type leaders who make people feel that this is the way it is. And I think that teachers almost felt that, look, these people have to know what they're talking about. They're in charge of big programs at these very prestigious universities. How could this be that they don't have it right? So the belief, I think, stems from these leaders in the field being so assuring that they're doing the right thing, and universities such as, Columbia University backing something like this up. Who am I to question? They must know what they're doing. So, I think there's a reason that those beliefs existed. And I think it really goes back to idol worship. Hate to say it, but when, we follow people instead of really thinking about the content, that's a problem. And I have to tell you, I'm seeing that in this world too, in the SOR world. People will deny it, but it happens on this side as well.
100%. I was just thinking that, and I was just also thinking, where's my cheers button? I need to get one so that I can give you
Yeah.
the cheers. Judy's holding up the cheers button. Um, yeah. So I completely agree, and I think that we see this in the science of reading movement too. That a lot of what is being driven isn't really coming from research. I hate to say that because I largely consider myself in favor of the science of reading movement. If I don't love labels, I don't like thinking of ourselves in groups, but largely consider myself a science reading teacher. And I think the science reading movement has largely been positive. But I also have to admit that the driving force behind it isn't necessarily research or people reading research. It's celebrities who are very confident and very good at marketing. And I think that's problematic, and it's a problematic way to promote science reading. Not to go off too long when I'm the host, not the guest, but I was listening to a podcast a couple months ago on marketing, and they were talking about why Donald Trump was a genius marketer, which I'm not a big Trump fan. Anyone who knows me pretty well will probably know that. But um, they said that basically he's so confident. When he first started to run in 2016, he was like, "I'm going to fix America. I'm going to make it the greatest country on earth. Everything is going to be wonderful. Everything is going to be perfect." And you see that with reading instruction people on both sides of the balance literacy and the reading or science reading movement, where people are like, "I'm going to fix all your problems. This is the end. This program here is better than all the other programs. All those other literacy programs, they're garbage. They don't work. Mine works. Only mine works." And you hear people say stuff like that. I got an email last week saying, "This is the unicorn magic secret program. Click here now to reserve your chance for the course." And I was like, "Come on." And this was a science reading person. I was just like, and I like the person. I like them. I have a great deal of respect for them. But like, this is a problem. When we sell people on this person has all the answers, I think it right away turns off for critical thinking. Sorry. I'll let you guys respond.
100%, Nate. And, again, not to get political at all, because, in this country, it's a very charged time right now with the election coming up. But I do think that when people speak in terms of superlatives, this is the best. I remember as a young girl that there were friends of mine who would speak like that. This is the best, these are the best genes. these are the best this is the best store to shop in. They always knew the best. And when people kind of speak like that, you know that you have to stop a minute and breathe and ask the question, why? What makes you say that? What makes you say that? And ask the right questions. So there's not enough of that going on. And like you said, it's shocking when we talk about evidence-based research that people don't question enough. And then when Judy and I push back, we're like thought of as traitors in some way. All we're trying to do is get people to think. And we said that at the very beginning of our podcast was we don't want to tell people what to think. We just want to encourage thinking.
That's funny.
Can
I
I
wrote
say
something similar at the
something
start of my
too?
book.
Oh,
Judy.
sorry.
No,
Sorry.
go. I was just wanting to say that one little thing. That was it.
Wait, say that again because I missed it.
Oh, I was just saying it's funny that she said that. Because at the beginning of all my books, I said like my goal is not to tell you how to teach or what to think. It's just to tell you like this is a way that you can approach thinking, that this is a way you can improve your critical thought of teaching in general. But Judy.
I think that both of you are saying exactly what's on my mind. And I think, it does become like we start to idolize these people. And it's like the real heroes are the teachers in the field. They are the ones wearing the capes every day. They are the ones that are doing the work. They are the ones in the trenches without materials that they need to get this going, or without the support of a principal that maybe doesn't know as much as they do about the science of reading and different factors. And I think the most important thing about the literacy view, and Faith and I talk about it all the time, we promote topics, not people, pedagogy, not programs, research and evidence, not opinions. And I think that I got to thank Faith Borkowski for that, my co-host, because when I started this journey, I was like a giddy little girl, the same way I was during my balanced literacy days. I would see these people at my trainings for universal literacy, and these were science of reading people, and I'd be like, oh my God, how amazing. I got to take a picture with them. Oh my God. They're just people. They're just people. They're just people trying to get through the day like I am. And yes, many of them have great ideas, but I think that I've really shifted in not just trusting everything at face value. I now am looking to people like you, Nate, like to break down the research, to make me understand, does this make sense, or is this the direction I need to go in? I don't trust everything at face value anymore. Like even with the research that came out about phonemic awareness, there were things that research was saying was not correct, but yet it was still happening in classrooms. And I had to figure it out. And like, I wasn't going to just take things for face value. And guess what? My phonemic awareness instruction looks much different right now than it did a year ago. So I think I have to thank Faith, and I have to thank you, Nate. I grew as a person because I no longer accept things at face value, and I no longer idolize people. I had some episodes where we just started the literacy view, and Faith would be like, Judy, what are you doing? And you know exactly who I'm talking about, Faith. I'm not going to say that person's name.
Well, and we don't have to say a name, but I was like, stop being a fangirl. Come on, stop that. They're just people.
You know what? I think sometimes it's okay to be a fan of a person. I'm gonna give someone a shout out right now because I think they showed a ton of courage this week, and I'm sure they had a hard week. Timothy Shanahan, I largely consider him like the leading expert. He knows far more than I do. He's a really smart guy. He's a really accomplished researcher. But somebody caught him in being wrong about something, and they caught him being dead wrong, for lack of a better word. And he just owned it and he admitted it and he put it out of retraction. And I think that's what we should all do. And I bring him up not to be like, oh, Tim Shanahan got something wrong. Bring it up because if even Tim Shanahan can get something wrong, we're all getting stuff wrong. Um, like this idea that there's some guru out there who knows everything is crazy talk. We're always making mistakes. We're always getting things wrong. We just have to change our opinions as we grow, as open our knowledge, and yeah.
But you see how he handled it. It's not
Yeah.
about being wrong. It's about how you handle it. He owned it. And what Judy mentioned before about the phonemic awareness problem, that everyone was confused about this. Do we do it with letters, without letters? When the research was squarely telling us that letters matched up with those sounds will improve phonemic awareness as a byproduct of it. We knew this. We knew this from reading
1 years ago.
That's right, a million years ago. So, but then, we thought that maybe that there was a change because obviously science changes. And that's how it was perceived. Like, oh, but now we know more, we know better. And what it turned out to be was it really wasn't science, but it was because we were following somebody who was perceived to have those answers. And I hate to say it, but this went on longer than it had to be. And
Yeah.
way, way too long. And teachers were very confused. And it would have been a lot easier if, when we're wrong, we just come out and say, you know what? I didn't have this right. We need to put it out there. And it was not done. As a matter of fact, Judy and I were at the same conference hearing the same things being said when we knew that this topic had answers by this point. And those teachers who attended the conference did not hear it that way.
Can I touch on that? Because it's something I've been thinking about this whole time, actually, is that there's, for lack of a better word, I think there's a bit of a fiasco with phonemic awareness within the science reading movement, in that a lot of the people at the start of the science reading movement who really started this process were really big on promoting teaching phonemic awareness without letters. And yet the science clearly showed for 20 years that was the wrong way to teach phonemic awareness. And as this science reading movement started to get bigger, more and more researchers started pointing out, like, hey guys, you got this like way wrong. And a lot of people got their feelings really hurt. And that was very clear. And I know I've written 3 or 4 articles on this topic. And the first time I wrote the article about it, I'd say about 70% of my feedback was angry. And then the next time I wrote an article about it, it was like 60%. And the last time I wrote an article about it, it was like 90% positive feedback. And what I saw is that people change their mind over time. And I think this is to me the most redeeming part about the science reading movement. I think once you tell people there's a science and that it's based on research, you open them up to the idea of changing their mind just by that very idea. And as you present them, if you present them, I hope, with enough research, enough times, and I feel like it almost takes you presenting that evidence more than once. The first time they hear it, they just want to explain it away. But once they've heard it a few times from a couple different sources, suddenly they're more open to it because they've adopted the idea that, well, we should be basing our ideas on research. And if all the researchers keep telling them the same thing, they're more open to changing their mind. And I think whereas 2020, most people would have said phonemic awareness without letters is science. I think today, if you ask the average person in the science reading movement, should you teach it without letters? They would say no. And there's still some holdouts for sure, but I think for the most part, that arc is gone. It's changed. And it really gives me a lot more faith in the science reading movement overall.
I have to say that I think Judy and I are very good about pushing back. And in some ways, we have changed the conversation. We've
You
seen it at,
definitely changed the conversation
yes. And
Faith,
on multiple
Faith, can I
issues.
say one thing we changed the conversation on also, which I'm still evolving in? Sound walls. The lips, the mouths, right?
No, I see. I agree. I think a lot of people were like, the sound walls are the most important thing. And I think I was always a little skeptical on that idea.
Ew.
But it seems a lot more people are skeptical all of a sudden. I put out an article at the time and I was real worried about it. And now I've seen multiple people put out articles be like, oh, that sound walls thing's kind of weird, right?
But I'll challenge you again, Nate. I think a lot of people didn't get the message. I've seen publications by school systems where the mouths are right in there. And that's my biggest fear. And that's why, you know, you mentioned the word optimism about the science of reading, and I'm actually kind of scared with the rollout of the science of reading and how it's going as a nation. I think that we're not where we should be yet. I think we've made many gains, but I think rollout is really hard. And I think that rollout is really hard in some ways because people are still, and I think this is a conversation we've had on the Literacy View many times too, is an overdependence on programs rather than really thinking about a curriculum, and an overdependence on, you know, programs over pedagogy and so forth. And I think that rolling out the science of reading has to really be thought of very carefully. What does that look like? And, you know, we got rid of guided reading, right? And a lot of teachers are still struggling with that concept. And I try to reassure them, it doesn't mean we got rid of small group reading. It just looks differently. But I think that the problem is interpretation. And I think if people don't do these things, like have kids read, we all know tier one instruction is the most important. Everybody, I think, whether you're in balanced literacy, science of reading, I hope that everybody knows that tier one instruction is so valuable. But I think tier two, is it happening in all the schools? I don't know. I'm really, really worried about how rollout is looking. I'm really worried, are kids still having books in their hands? Are kids still book shopping? There was nothing wrong with book shopping. Now, what we shop for might look different, but I still think that there's still a lot of work in order to get this right. And my fear is still, I don't want a lot of people to say science of reading isn't working. I told you so, haha, you guys got it wrong. Because it could happen.
That scares me. I've long been worried that it's going to get oversimplified, and then we'll have the balanced literacy whole language sharks, for lack of a better word, come out and be like, "Oh, I told you it never worked. Time to come back to my programs." And I've tried hard not to criticize the science reading movement. In fact, I've written an article defending it because there's so much criticism of it from those whole language balanced literacy people. I don't want to be lumped in with that. And I don't want a whole language person to play this podcast later on and be like, I told you. Everything they said, I told you this. I don't want that. That bugs me. If you're a whole language person listening, please know that I don't subscribe to what you're pushing. But I do think we have to be critical at the same time. And Faith, you haven't talked in a while, so we better hear from you.
Well, I do think a lot of that is pushed and by journalists and influencers. And we've had this conversation before. I'm very much a fan of writers, journalists, but the word journalism has changed tremendously. And that could be another story, Nate. But look, when I was a kid, when we heard the news, generally it wasn't about news that was filtered through the eyes of the person speaking. It was news. It was based in fact. And now the way the world is, I guess with cable television, everything has changed, where news is not the same. And what I think happened with SOR is kind of like a microcosm of what the whole world is with news now, that even the journalists now are creating news instead of reporting news. And so I agree with you that I am a proponent of science and evidence, but it's being twisted. There's like a game of telephone happening. And so they kind of get the story, but then they become celebrities themselves. And then they kind of present it in a view that works for them. And there's a lot involved in that. And I think for some, not all, because there are some who are very fair-minded, but for some, it becomes where they're invested in it. It's not just a story they're reporting. They have a vested interest in this. And to promote a story, sometimes the story changes. I could tell you that Judy and I changed the narrative as well on those types of stories too. And
You've
because
changed it multiple times.
Yes, because we pushed back and people were believing a story. And, that I think that we now know that it's more nuanced than that. I'll say it this way, it's way more nuanced. And that wasn't being presented that way originally. It was being presented in a way like, well, as long as we have, knowledge-based curriculum, that would be enough to get kids reading well and writing well. And those terrible main idea questions, you don't really need to do that. And I was like, what? It was so bizarre to me. Now, the way it traditionally was, like just throw out a bunch of main idea questions to kids and expect them to know what the main idea is. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that anytime kids read, they should be thinking about what the main idea is of what they're reading. Who doesn't? It was like such a ridiculous type of thing. And so Judy and I would have these conversations. I said, oh no, we can't let something like this kind of be the standard, the gold standard of what people think comprehension is supposed to be, or that there's really no instruction needed as long as you have a deep curriculum, a rich curriculum. Now, all of a sudden, I see people changing their ideas slowly by saying, oh, no, we never said that. We never said those things. Well, once something's in writing, don't say that, because I could pull up those articles very, very easily. We could go back and we could show exactly and circle where this was said. So, but, getting to your point, Nate, again, you don't want people to think that you don't believe in science. Yes, I believe in science, but what people are saying is not science, but it goes under that umbrella, science of reading. And then sometimes they're the ones who get the most likes and the most, speaking engagements. And people believe it because if you say something enough times, people believe it. They take it
Yeah.
as
Yeah, I think, a lot of this comes back to what is the science of reading. I love the Reading League's definition of the science of reading as a body of knowledge. I think that's a great definition, and I think the Reading League has done great work. And I don't even agree with everything they've put out position statements on. Obviously, they were pro phonemic awareness without letters to some extent, but I still think they're a great institution, and I'm very supportive of what they do. Um, but I think when we talk about bad actors, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but I think we got to be careful when anyone's selling a program, and because when they're selling a program, that seems to be where we get the least nuance because they just want to funnel you towards their program. I'm much more comfortable listening to a teacher or a researcher than I am a person who wants a program. And that's not to say programs are bad. I have a program. I know you're supportive of Word Wasp. Um, I think actually programs can be really helpful for teachers in certain places, and I think the people who make them tend to be really passionate, but they also tend to be business people. And I think you have to be really careful listening to a business person about what is science, because their science always tends to be their program is what works. And I'm sure the same could be said of any reading recovery advocate. The science they're going to promote is going to be the science that says reading recovery is awesome.
I just want to say one quick thing. It's a tool. And that's what it is. It's a tool. It should not be a body of knowledge. And people are mixing that up. The program becomes the body of knowledge. No, you should have the body of knowledge and use the program as the tool to get to where you want to go. And because it's a tool, it might not be a complete tool. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It just
and to be quite frank, some tools are better than other tools, and some tools make it easier for teachers to implement the work than other tools, and some tools are having teachers scratch their heads and want to say, screw this all, we can't take it anymore, because it's not all getting us the results that we want. And it's still, some of these things are still taking us troubleshooting. Is this the best worksheet? Not every worksheet in every program was field tested. Not every lesson that was written or kind of halfway written was field tested. We have to remember that, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's think about I think some of our final points. If Judy, if you could tell me what do you think the science reading movement is doing right, and what do you think they're doing wrong? I'd love to hear that.
I think one of the biggest accomplishments that the science of reading is getting right is universal screening for students. I see that nationwide. I see it in the town that I live, which is Greenwich, Connecticut. Finally, I've been waiting for that. So cheers to you, Greenwich, Connecticut. You guys are dibbling those kids. I see it in New York City. Kudos to New York City for using Acadians as a universal screener. I think that a lot more schools are sending that information to parents. Parents that I tutor are getting those reports. They're learning to understand what the science is all about. So that's an amazing thing. I think a lot more schools are thinking about their literacy blocks and how they're spending and budgeting their time to make sure that the important pieces of a structured literacy classroom are happening. What else do I think we're getting right? I want to see more positive. I think that there's definitely growth in the gradual release and understanding the I do, the we do, and the you do in instruction, that we cannot get good results unless we really model to kids, unless we have kids practicing together, and then we give them a chance to be independent. So I think there's a lot of growth in that area as well. I think areas that still need development is small group instruction. I think I need to see kids reading more and being able to transfer those skills. I think a lot of kids are, starting to decode better, but need to learn how to transfer those skills in authentic text. I think schools still need to get even better at budgeting their time and making sure read alouds are happening regardless of whatever program you're using. There's a lot of research to say that read alouds really are one of the most powerful comprehension tools out there. So let's use that more. And I think that teacher training has to be more intense. I don't think that we're playing with an equal playing field on how much professional development teachers have received. I received a ton. I'm lucky. I saw coaching getting cut in a lot of districts. I think that we have to level the playing field by giving our teachers the resources that they need in those classrooms, giving them more support. And I think that we also have to catch a lot of leaders up to speed. I think a lot of them have, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
I agree with a lot of that. Faith.
So I would agree with what Judy said about the positives. I do think that parents played a very important role in this, as you said before, that they were vocal. They really did their research.
Mm-hmm.
And, the parents in some cases knew more than the professionals because they made it their business to know when their kids were struggling. They were very active. They took a very active role in this. And so as far as SOR goes, a lot of thanks goes to the parents.
Especially the moms. I'm gonna throw that out there.
Well, yeah. And they really pushed this agenda. And I think they get a lot of credit. I think there are plenty of teachers out there that are vocal, and they want this. They see the difference. Success breeds success. If you do it and you're successful, you want to continue that success. So that's a positive. What I think is a negative is what I said before, the idol worship, the influencers, the marketers. It's a very dangerous territory, and people cannot be so gullible that it's so easy to fall right back into this, only a different group of people. Same type of problems, different face, different label to it. And as you said before, the Reading League does great work. But I do remember at one point they were promoting these T-shirts that said Seidenberg, Kilpatrick, maybe. I don't remember the other names. I remember Seidenberg was one of them. And I said, I would never wear one of those shirts. And because the same way I don't walk around with a shirt that says Chanel or Ralph Lauren or something like that, why would I walk around with a shirt that has somebody's name on it? Again, you're only a person. Great. You do great things. I respect you, but I'm not walking around with someone else's name on my shirt. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem right there. That's not what we should be pushing. We should not be pushing people. And I know what the idea was, like, these are people we should respect. These are the real researchers. Yes, I get that. But this is what makes people angry. And it's the same, it's no different when those little girls were doing the Lucy Calkins dance. When they showed that when they were doing a rap to Lucy. I'm sure you saw that with.
I've never seen that. I have no idea what you're talking about, actually.
It was part of Emily Hanford's special that the
Oh, really?
sold a
I must
store.
have forgot that part. I must have forgotten that part.
Maybe I remembered it because to me it was so stunning how they were doing this little rap when Lucy came into the school. They were so excited. Don't you remember she said, oh, that somebody said it was like a movie star coming in to
I
visit the
remember that.
school. And they were doing a Lucy rap or something like that. No, no, Lucy should not be getting a rap song.
Right now, Faith. And you know what? You did say the magic buzzword. You said, Lucy, so I'm taking a sip of water.
Right. So, but again, I'm going to drink to any of those types of things. I'm going to take a sip to any type of idol worship. That's not what we should be doing. We should not be wearing Seidenberg's name on our shirts. So it's things like that, because he could make mistakes too. Just like you said, nobody has all the answers. Yes, people give us good information, but we should not be doing that. So I think that's what we get wrong in the science of reading, and it's a dangerous territory.
Yeah. Well, I have a very similar answer to you, Faith. I'm going to start. I think that the science reading movement made phonics cool again, and I'm really grateful to the movement for that alone. I think whole language had its reign, and I think its science reading movement has really put, for now at least, a nail in the coffin of whole language, and really repopularized systematic phonics instruction. And I think it really deserved to be repopularized because I think it's crazy that it wasn't. The evidence, in my opinion, I'm sure Bowers would disagree with me, but I think the evidence is pretty darn strong at this point that whole language is not the answer. So I'm really grateful that the science reading movement did that. And I'm really grateful that it made science cool, for lack of a better word. I think it's opened up the idea to the fact that research can change our minds, or we should be willing to change our minds based on research. And I see evidence that that is happening. I see um, I see more nuance happening on different issues. You talked about sound walls are becoming, there's more pushback against sound walls. You see there's more pushback against teaching phonemic ordinance without letters. And there was lots of little things that were marketed with the science reading movement that I'm now seeing pushback from within the science reading movement itself. And I think that's a really good sign. And I think that there's no putting the genie back in the bottle from that once people open their minds to that idea. But I also agree that there's a danger to the influencer culture that exists with the science reading and with books and with podcasts. You know, I can't count the number of times I said something like, phonemic awareness should be taught with letters according to the citation. And somebody came at me with like a podcast or a book, or a blog article, to cite. Um, there was one saw someone say we should be teaching phonics K to 12 to all students. And I'm like, research really doesn't support that. And they cited Emily Hanford's podcast. And I was just like, what is going on here? Their podcast isn't even really about that idea. But, going back to what you're saying about the rap, this last Halloween, I saw people dressing up as UFOI program superheroes, as that was their costume. And I saw people dressing up as EBLI too. And nothing against those programs. I'm sure that they're good programs, but um, I do think it, and nothing against those teachers either. But it's taking something too far when we're identifying as our program. Like I'm a reading recovery teacher or I'm a UFOI teacher. It's too much. I think we got to be remember to be critical, and I think when we're promoting our ideas, we should be pointing to studies, not an author, not a blog, not a podcast. And I say this as a blogger and a podcaster and an author. I don't want you to be like, "Hey, Nate Hansford said this is true, so it's true." That's crazy talk. Please never do that. So that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate the cheers button.
Yes. Big cheers on that one, Nate.
Well, um, that's it for now for me, guys. I really want everyone to check out the Literacy View podcast. It's my favorite podcast for reading instruction, and I say that as a reading instruction podcaster, not a reading recovery teacher. Never have been. Don't know enough about the program to do that. And I really want to give a big shout out to Faith's book, Failing Students or Failing Schools. I think that's a great book. So um, until next time, folks, which I have no idea when it will be because I really just do these conversations now when I want to chat with people and I record them up on YouTube. Um, thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us.
I just want to say, Nate, thank you for having us. This was a delightful conversation. And Judy and I have the utmost respect for what you do. And your recent post about your phonics program being available to parents, that is so generous of you. And I am going to share that post as well. Just really, really good of you to put that out there to parents who are looking for that type of help. Good for you.
Thank you.